Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take a huge stack of information, break it all down, and pull out the absolute key nuggets for you.
That's the plan.
And today, well, we're tackling someone truly fascinating, a figure who honestly shaped the modern world we live in, for better or maybe sometimes for worse. Steve Jobs.
Right. And our guide for this is Walter Isaacson's definitive biography, Steve Jobs. We're using excerpts from that, and it's quite the source.
It really is.
Because this isn't just, a list of dates and events. It's a journey right into the mind of someone who, and Isaacson puts it perfectly, knew that the best way to create value in the 21st century was to connect creativity with technology.
That connection is key.
Exactly. So we're going to try and unpack how his, incredible leaps of imagination, sometimes bordering on genius, really, how they combine with these amazing feats of engineering, and how that built Apple, a company that, it's still innovating today, isn't it? It's still shaking things up.
Absolutely. And what makes this source, Isaacson's book, so valuable for our deep dive is the access he got. Jobs himself cooperated. Fully cooperated.
Which is pretty rare for someone like Jobs.
It really is. Isaacson writes, Jobs asked for no control over what was written, nor even the right to read it before it was published. Think about that.
Wow.
He apparently put nothing off limits. He actually encouraged people, friends, enemies, colleagues, to be totally honest. Brutally honest, even.
Yeah, and that comes through. The book really delivers that unvarnished view. You get the passion, the perfectionism, definitely the obsession.
Obsessions.
Right, the artistry too, but also the devilry, as Isaacson calls it, and that absolute compulsion for control that just defined his whole approach.
It's like a rare window into what made him tick. The good, the bad, all of it.
For sure. And his old colleague, Del Joachim, he had this really sharp insight. He said Jobs' desire for complete control of whatever he makes derives directly from his personality and the fact that he was abandoned at birth.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And it connects right back to the beginning.
It does. That abandonment, it wasn't just some background detail. It feels like a foundational piece. It really set the stage for how he saw the world, his products, the people around him, everything.
Okay, so that's exactly what we want to unpack for you today. We'll start with the context, why this book is so significant. Then we'll really dig into the progression of his life and ideas, period by period.
And we'll analyze those core concepts, like what drove him. We'll use real-world examples from the book, lots of them.
We'll look at how these different ideas, maybe seemingly separate things, actually connect and build on each other.
Okay.
And we have to talk about the controversies, right? Yeah. The criticisms. They're a big part of the story.
Absolutely essential. Can't ignore those. And the memorable stories, the anecdotes that really bring him to life, warts and all.
Right. And then we'll wrap it up by distilling it down. What are the practical takeaways? What's the lasting value you can get from understanding this incredibly complex, often difficult, but undeniably brilliant person?
Yeah, we're looking at what really drove him from those unconventional beginnings, his unique take on reality, let's say.
A unique take is putting it mildly.
Right. All the way to that relentless pursuit of perfection in every single Apple product. And it's fascinating how his personal history, his kind of philosophical leanings, they directly stamp themselves onto Apple's products.
Making them extensions of him.
Exactly. Extensions of his will, his vision. It's kind of amazing how deeply one person's personality can get baked into a giant corporation's DNA like that.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. Because Isaacson makes a really strong case that Jobs' earliest experiences, they weren't just background noise. They shaped everything. He was adopted. And the book stresses how profoundly that single fact echoed through his whole life. His adoptive parents, Clara and Paul Jobs, they desperately wanted kids but couldn't have them. Clara had an ectopic pregnancy, which was devastating for them.
Yeah, tough situation.
So Isaacson writes, by 1955, after 9 years of marriage, they were looking to adopt a child. And that child was Steve.
And it's how Jobs processed this, right? That's what's so key. He remembered his parents telling him, very specifically, we specifically picked you out.
Emphasis on specifically.
Exactly. They apparently emphasized every word. And this led him to these core concepts about himself. Abandoned, chosen, special. It became central to how he saw himself.
Almost like a personal mythology.
Kind of, yeah. His close friends really believed it left deep scars. Greg Calhoun, one of his buddies, saw a direct link there. He said, Steve talked to me a lot about being abandoned and the pain that caused. it made him independent.
That makes sense.
Yeah, he followed the beat of a different drummer, and that came from being in a different world than he was born into. That feeling of being chosen, not just given up, it gave him this powerful, almost messianic drive.
And that sense of being special, chosen, mixed with the hurt of abandonment. Del Yocam, his childhood friend, he explicitly tied that to Jobs' later management style.
Right, I remember that quote.
Yocam said, "I think his desire for complete control of whatever he makes derives directly from his personality and the fact that he was abandoned at birth. He wants to control his environment, and he sees the product as an extension of himself."
Boom. There it is.
Yeah. So you see this deep, almost primal need to impose absolute order on everything around him, his products, his company, maybe as a way to compensate for that early chaos he couldn't control.
Beyond just the emotional stuff, though, his adoptive dad, Paul Jobs, he was huge, too. A machinist.
Yeah.
He gave Steve this crucial practical grounding.
Right, the hands-on stuff.
Yeah. Paul apparently did not have a deep understanding of electronics, but he knew mechanics inside out. He got Steve into fixing cars, took him on junkyard trips to scavenge for parts for different projects.
Building things from scrap.
Exactly. It instilled that practical, hands-on approach and an early appreciation for quality, for craftsmanship, even in junk parts. Paul was also apparently a good bargainer, knew the real value of things.
The negotiator emerges early.
Maybe. Isaacson suggests it rubbed off on Steve's later formidable negotiating prowess. You can sort of see the seeds there.
So his dad gave him that blue-collar respect for how things are made. But it wasn't just the garage, was it? It was Silicon Valley itself, the whole environment.
Oh, absolutely. The air was thick with it. Even the ne'er-do-wells tended to be engineers, as Isaacson puts it.
Love that.
Dobbs himself remembered seeing his first computer terminal over at NASA Ames, and he just said, "I fell totally in love with it."
Not just interested, in love.
Yeah. It wasn't casual. It sparked this deep passion, almost like a spiritual thing for him with computing. He soaked up the whole history of the Valley, knew he wanted to be a big part of it.
And it wasn't just tech influences, right? There was that organic gardener neighbor.
That's such a great detail. Yeah, this neighbor down the street grew everything to perfection. And that apparently fostered Jobs' appreciation for quality, for natural processes.
Interesting.
He recalled, "I never had better food in my life. That's when I began to appreciate organic fruits and vegetables." It seems small, but Isaacson suggests it foreshadows his later obsession with design purity.
Like every component had to be perfect.
Exactly, seen or unseen. Like a perfectly grown organic carrot. It's about that holistic quality, maybe learned early on.
That makes sense, connecting those dots. So his teenage years, the book talks about him messing with electronics, but also pranks.
Oh, yeah. He wired his house with speakers that doubled as microphones, had a control room in his closet to eavesdrop.
Classic teenage stuff, but maybe with a Jobsian twist.
His dad was not amused, apparently.
Yeah.
But yeah, he also got deep into the counterculture, including LSD.
Right, he was quite open about that later.
Very. He told a New York Times reporter it was one of the 2 or 3 most important things he'd done in his life, claimed people who hadn't tried it would never fully understand him.
Which is a pretty bold statement.
It is. He also got into Heath kits, those build-it-yourself electronics kits. That taught him he could build and understand anything. Big confidence booster.
So electronics, counterculture, and Zen Buddhism. That seems like a crucial piece, too.
Hugely important. It wasn't just a phase for him. Isaacson says it became deeply ingrained in his personality. It fueled his aesthetic, that stark, minimalist look.
The Apple look.
Right. And his intense focus. Plus, his belief that intuition, that intuitive understanding and consciousness, was more important than just, logical analysis.
Feeling overthinking.
In a way, yeah. That philosophical foundation is absolutely key to understanding his design approach. Simplicity, directness. Though it's worth noting, the Zen didn't always make him, calm.
Understatement.
Right. His intensity often got in the way. Isaacson mentions him being rude about food, things like that. So it was a complex application of those beliefs.
And this period also sets up the reality distortion field.
Ah, yes. The famous RDF, Bud Tribble, coined that term later, borrowed from Star Trek. But the roots are here, in his youth.
How so?
Isaacson suggests Jobs learned early on he could bend reality to his desires. He developed this profound sense that he was special, a chosen one, maybe even enlightened.
Wow.
Andy Hertzfeld, one of the Mac team guys, even said Jobs hinted he was enlightened. Hertzfeld compared it to Nietzsche. That belief in his own specialness, his own power, it allowed him to push people, push boundaries, make them believe the impossible was possible.
Powerful tool. Or weapon, maybe?
Both, probably. It absolutely defined his leadership style. Okay, so then comes Steve Wozniak. Their meeting in 1970, Isaacson calls it the most significant meeting in a Silicon Valley garage since Hewlett went into Packard's 32 years earlier. High praise.
Quite the statement. How did they connect?
Through a mutual friend, Bill Fernandez. Wozniak was apparently just captivated by Jobs' sheer energy, his business drive, and his ability to just, call up people he didn't know and make them do things.
Skills Wozniak knew he didn't have.
Exactly. Wozza admired it. They also bonded over music, apparently. Big Bob Dylan fans, collecting bootlegs, arguing about lyrics, shows that creative intensity they shared beyond just circuits.
And Wozniak, he was the technical genius, right? The wizard.
Oh, undeniably. The book paints him as just brilliant, a pure hardware engineer. He designed this roulette game for fun where someone got shocked.
Sounds like was.
Yeah. His talent was insane. He could design computers on paper using half the chips that established companies were using in their own designs, just sketching them out for fun, proving it could be done. Pure engineering brilliance.
The perfect foil for Jobs' vision and drive.
Totally. And their first real collaboration, the Blue Box, that illegal phone freaking device.
Making free calls.
Right. That really showed their dynamic early on. Wozniak's engineering genius, Jobs' knack for packaging it, marketing it, even if it was slightly illicit, that pattern just repeated itself with Apple.
And Jobs' time at Atari was important too, wasn't it?
Yeah, working on games like Breakout. That taught him a lot about user-friendliness. And he picked up Nolan Bushnell's, driven attitude, that just get it done, take no prisoners approach.
So the Apple I, literally born in the garage.
Paul Jobs' garage, yeah. He cleared out for them, put in a workbench, hung schematics on the wall, set up labeled drawers for parts, even built a burn box to test circuit boards.
Dad supporting the dream.
Totally.
Yeah.
The book paints this picture of a real scrappy, hands-on beginning. Paul Jobs was apparently a calming influence, too, sometimes asking Steve, "What's the matter? You got a feather up your ass?" when he got too worked up.
Love it. A dose of reality.
Needed, probably. And speaking of reality checks, Wozniak, being the proper engineer, he first offered the Apple I design to HP, where she worked.
The ethical thing to do.
Right. But HP turned him down flat, said it didn't fit into the company's high-quality market segments, called it a hobbyist product.
Ouch. Big miss for HP.
Huge. But that rejection, ironically, freed Wozniak up to partner with Jobs and actually co-found Apple. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do big companies miss the boat because something new doesn't fit their existing boxes?
It happens all the time. Risk aversion versus startup agility.
Exactly. And early on, Jobs showed that distinctive style, his negotiation skills, his eye for quality, which, often tipped into stubbornness.
Like with Commodore.
Yeah. When Chuck Peddle from Commodore showed interest in the Apple II, Jobs just casually suggested they buy Apple for a few $100,000. Wozniak was apparently stunned.
Till move.
And later, when Commodore decided to build their own machine, the PET, Jobs just dismissed it, called their leadership sleazy and the product real crappy. Vintage Jobs, strong opinions, total belief in Apple's superiority.
That conviction needed something more, though, right? To become a real company.
It needed structure. It needed money. Enter Mike Markkula.
The Intel millionaire.
Right. An early Intel guy who'd made millions on stock options. Markkula was, according to Isaacson, a cautious and shrewd man. He became absolutely critical to Apple for the next 2 decades.
What did he bring?
The business chops, pricing strategies, distribution networks, marketing plans, finance, all the stuff Jobs and Woz, brilliant as they were, didn't really have. Markkula provided that essential framework to turn the garage hobby into a real business.
And Markkula got a taste of Jobs' perfectionism pretty quickly, I bet.
Oh, yeah. That obsession for product perfection, it led to immediate clashes with Mike Scott, who Markkula brought in as Apple's general manager.
Scott was the pragmatist.
Totally. While Jobs was agonizing over 2,000 shades of beige for the Apple II case, or debating just how rounded the corners should be, Scott just wanted a decision made.
I can imagine the frustration.
And Jobs wanted special order benches that were pure white for the labs, not standard gray. Constant battles over things that seemed minor to Scott, but were fundamental to Jobs' vision.
It's that tension again. Artistic vision versus just getting things done.
Perfectly put. And the Apple II warranty story is classic. Jobs insisted on a 1-year warranty.
Which was unheard of then, right? 90 days was standard.
Exactly. Scott was flabbergasted. They argued fiercely. Jobs apparently even dissolved into tears during one fight over it.
Wow, that intense.
But Scott eventually gave in. It shows Jobs' sheer force of will, his ability to push his vision through, even if it meant major friction and emotional outbursts.
But it does make you ask, was all that necessary? Wozniak himself said Steve's contributions could have happened without so many stories about him terrorizing folks.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The book shows both sides. His methods caused immense stress, high turnover, burnt people out, no question. They also pushed teams to achieve things they didn't think were possible. It created this intense, almost fanatical dedication to excellence. Jobs seemed to believe that crucible, however harsh, was necessary for making truly insanely great products.
A tough trade-off.
A really tough one. And it's a debate still very much alive in tech leadership today. How far do you push? Okay, so moving into the Macintosh era, we have to talk about Xerox PANARC.
Right, the Palo Alto Research Center, kind of legendary.
Totally. Set up in 1970, it was this incredible spawning ground for digital ideas, deliberately kept separate from Xerox's main business pressures, allowed them to dream big.
And Alan Kay was there.
Yeah, the visionary scientist. Isaacson highlights his 2 great maxims that deeply influenced Jobs. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. And people who are serious about software should make their own hardware.
Hardware and software integration, that sounds familiar.
Exactly. Kay's vision of a Dynabook, a small, personal, easy-to-use computer, it laid so much groundwork.
And Jobs got to see what they were doing at Barak, right? The famous visit.
The legendary visit. Xerox PANARC's engineers had developed things that were just mind-blowing back then. User-friendly graphics, the whole desktop metaphor with icons and folders, and of course the mouse.
Stuff we take for granted now.
Completely.
Yeah.
But back then, compared to the command lines and DOS prompts, it was revolutionary. That visit, seeing that graphical user interface in action, it profoundly shaped Jobs' vision for the Macintosh. It gave him the missing piece.
So the Mac project itself, it didn't start with Jobs, did it?
No, it began as Annie under Jeff Raskin. Raskin wanted to build a truly inexpensive computer for the masses. He renamed it Macintosh, like his favorite Apple, but tweaked the spelling.
Avoid lawsuits.
Right. But then Jobs, who'd been kind of pushed out of the Lisa computer project and was looking for his next thing, he basically took over the Mac project.
And steered it in a very different direction.
Completely. He pushed it away from Raskin's cheap appliance idea toward the sleek, beautiful, tightly integrated machine that embodied his philosophies. His passion for product perfection just took over.
He wanted it to look friendly.
Yeah, like a human face, with a gentle chin and those rounded corners. It shows that intuitive design sense, that Zen influence, again, stark, minimalist, but approachable.
And that obsession with unseen details, too.
Oh, yeah. Perfecting the inside of the Mac's case, even though users would almost never see it. That came straight from his dad's lessons about craftsmanship. Every part, visible or not, had to be perfect. It was fundamental to his philosophy.
And the details drove the team crazy, I bet. Like the rounded corners debate.
Yeah. Bill Atkinson, one of the key engineers, kept pushing back. Until Jobs apparently dragged him outside, pointed to a no parking sign, and explained why a rounded rectangle was a fundamental primitive shape they needed. Atkinson finally got it.
Whatever it takes.
And the packaging? Jobs made them redo the box 50 times.
Yeah.
Why? Because each detail was essential to making the Macintosh amazing, even the box that gets thrown away. That commitment to unseen craftsmanship, it made the Mac almost ostentatious in its lack of ostentation.
He even hit a Sony engineer.
Yeah, Hidetoshi Komodo. He was secretly working on a better disk drive for the Mac. Jobs kept him hidden from other Apple employees when he visited. Total secrecy and control.
Which brings us back to the reality distortion field. Chapter 11.
The RDF, coined by Bud Tribble, one of the Mac software guys, borrowing from Star Trek. It perfectly describes Jobs' uncanny ability to just bend reality.
How so?
To make reality malleable, convince anyone of practically anything, inspire the team to do the impossible. Andy Hertzfeld said Jobs truly believed the rules didn't apply to him, fueled by that sense of being special, a chosen one. Hertzfeld even compared him to Nietzsche. That sheer will to power.
But it had a serious dark side.
Absolutely. The book is clear on that. It led to impetuous interventions, projects falling way behind schedule and way over budget, and worse, brutalized human feelings.
Is a temper.
Yeah, the tantrums, the outbursts, they burned people out. And Bowers, the HR director, apparently had to lecture him constantly after his fits. He'd just say, I know, admit he could barely contain himself, but he rarely changed.
And the flip-flopping.
Yeah.
Calling an idea stupid one week, claiming it as his own the next.
Yeah, Tribble called him high-voltage alternating current. That drove people nuts. It was volatile, unconventional, but again, you have to ask, did that chaos somehow fuel the creativity? Did it push people beyond their limits? It's deeply uncomfortable, but the results were undeniable.
So for the Mac launch, he needed something huge, an ad as revolutionary as the product.
Exactly, something to stop people in their tracks. And he got it with the 1984 ad.
The Ridley Scott-directed Super Bowl ad.
It's really iconic. Created by Lee Clow and Shia Day. It positioned Apple as this liberating force against the conformity of Big Blue, IBM, depicted as Big Brother. It was a rallying cry, a masterclass in branding.
But Isaacson points out a contradiction there, right, between the ad's message and Jobs himself.
A fascinating one. While the ad painted Jobs as the counterculture rebel, the book argues he'd actually increasingly abandoned the hacker spirit.
How so?
He was the one who insisted on selling the Apple iBoards, not giving away the design. He pushed Apple to become a corporation. And he built the Macintosh as a closed and controlled system, which, ironically, was maybe more like something Big Brother would design than a hacker.
He became the system he was fighting against.
In a way, yeah. Driven by that deep need for control, overriding the early hacker ethos. It's a complex tension within him.
Speaking of tension, Bill Gates, Microsoft, the scorpion dance.
Ah, great phrase from the book. Jobs really looked down on Gates, saw him as just a business person, focused on winning deals, not making great products. He thought Gates shamelessly ripped off other people's ideas.
Pretty harsh.
Very. But it fueled this incredibly volatile, incredibly important rivalry that really shaped the whole personal computer industry.
Did Gates respect Jobs at all?
Isaacson says Gates developed a grudging respect for Jobs' intuition, his amazing instinct for what works. But their interactions were legendary for being tense.
Like when Gates showed Jobs an early version of Windows.
Yeah. Gates demoed it quietly, professionally. Jobs just exploded, called it a piece of shit. Classic Jobs bluntness. It highlights their deep differences. Jobs closed, integrated Apple versus Gates's open, licensed Microsoft. That core philosophical battle defined the era, and you still see echoes of it today.
Okay, so the Mac era leads eventually to the split with John Sculley. This was huge for Jobs.
Massive turning point. And Jobs had recruited Sculley so aggressively from Pepsi, remember?
The famous, do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?
Exactly. He flattered Sculley, played on his ego, told him, I really think you're the guy. I want you to come and work with me. I can learn so much from you. Sculley admitted he was totally smitten by him. He genuinely believed in Jobs' vision.
But the reality of working together was different.
Very different. Sculley just couldn't handle Jobs' rudeness to people, his raw, unfiltered emotions. Jobs would throw code back at engineers just saying, I know they can do better. No real feedback.
Not exactly constructive management.
Not at all. And Sculley, coming from Pepsi's structured world, just failed to realize that it was not in Jobs' nature to share control. Jobs couldn't filter himself. That inability to share power, it was bound to clash with Sculley being CEO.
And the Mac wasn't selling as well as hoped initially, right? That added pressure?
Big time. Sales were disappointing. Sculley eventually just lost confidence in Jobs' ability to run the Macintosh division. The board backed Sculley.
So they sidelined him.
Yeah, moved him to this empty chairman role. The org chart literally showed his box with no lines connecting to it. A brutal public humiliation for Jobs.
How did you take it?
Badly. Isaacson describes his departure as a July 4 weekend struggle. He felt totally diminished, went home, apparently played Bob Dylan tapes for hours, especially the times they are changing, focusing on that line, for the loser now will be later to win.
Wow, already thinking about the comeback.
Seems like it. It was deeply personal, a massive blow. But even then, there was this hint of future resurgence. Though Sculley thought Jobs just wanted to start a rival company, and Jobs immediately started spinning a press his way after leaving, showing that need to control the story never went away.
So he leaves Apple and starts NXT, the computer company.
Right. And at NXT, that passion for perfection, Isaacson says, it went out of control, almost became self-destructive.
How so?
He obsessed over the NXT computer being a perfect cube, insisted on no such draft angles, those slight tapers that let parts pop out of molds easily.
Which makes manufacturing harder and more expensive.
Way more expensive. It meant separate, complex molds costing $650,000. He bought a $150,000 sanding machine just to remove tiny seam lines invisible to most people. It was aesthetic purity over practicality, big time.
And he was tough on suppliers. Brutal. Made a die caster start completely over because he noticed a tiny line in the chassis. It's that recurring pattern. Prioritize perfection above all else, even cost or market reality. The later G4Q at Apple had similar issues, over-designed and overpriced, sold poorly. Sometimes that perfectionism backfired commercially.
A tough lesson to learn.
Often learned the hard way. But next, he still attracted big names, right? Like Ross Perot.
Yeah, the Texas billionaire investor. He apparently instantly identified with Jobs and his gang, watched a documentary about them, and was finishing their sentences.
Shows Jobs' charisma, right?
Yeah.
Even with a struggling company, he could pull powerful people into his orbit. But he still played games with the press. Promised exclusives to both Fortune and Newsweek for the next T launch, which obviously backfired. That manipulative streak was still there. And he had huge blow-ups, like a screaming match with Pixar executive Alvy Ray Smith. Yeah. Still volatile.
Okay, let's talk Pixar. You bought that from George Lucas, right? Initially, it was a hardware company. Primarily, yeah. And it was losing money, a lot of money. But Jobs saw something else there. He believed in the animation side, specifically in John Lasseter's creative talent.
And that bet paid off.
Eventually, yeah. When Tin Toy won an Academy Award in 1988 for Best Animated Short, the first computer-generated film ever to win it vindicated Jobs' faith. It showed quality and artistry could win, and it opened up this whole new creative realm for him, storytelling, animation.
Then came Toy Story. Huge hit. Changed everything.
Absolutely massive. Cemented Pixar's reputation overnight, though initially some reviewers tried to give Disney all the credit.
And Jobs wasn't having that.
No way. He went on the offensive, making sure everyone knew Pixar was the studio behind it. He called it only the second studio to make a feature animated film that was a blockbuster since Disney's Snow White. He fiercely protected Pixar's credit.
The negotiation with Disney, particularly with Jeffrey Katzenberg, that sounds intense too.
Oh, yeah. Isaacson describes Katzenberg as having a tyrant personality, much like Jobs himself. Alvy Ray Smith called them both tyrants with an amazing gift of gab. They clashed.
But Jobs won some key points.
He did. Critically, he won the fight for Pixar to keep the rights to its own proprietary 3D animation technology. That was huge for Pixar's independence and future success.
And there was that rivalry over the Ant movies, A Bug's Life versus Ants.
Yeah, apparently Katzenberg started DreamWorks Ants after hearing Lasseter pitch A Bug's Life when Katzenberg was still at Disney. Intense competition, high-stakes Hollywood drama, Jobs was right in the thick of it.
And the Pixar IPO made Jobs a billionaire, right? Finally, huge financial success outside Apple.
Massive. Made him $1.2 billion on paper, way more than the Apple IPO. But he always insisted, I've never done this for the money.
You believe him?
I think mostly, yeah. For him, it seemed genuinely about building something lasting, something innovative. He talked about wanting to create a company that was so imbued with innovative creativity that it would outlive them. Legacy and impact seemed to be the real drivers, more than just cash.
The book also covers some personal connections during this time, finding his biological sister, Mona Simpson.
Right. Discovering her late in life, that was a big deal for him. They apparently shared this intense artistry, a similar eye for detail. He was thrilled, saying, my sister's a writer. He called her my family. I don't know what I'd do without her. A really deep connection.
Though she later wrote a novel that was pretty clearly based on him, right? A regular guy.
Yeah, an edgy portrayal shows their relationship had complexity too.
And then learning that their shared biological father, Jandali, had also abandoned Mona. That must have been strange for Jobs.
Especially since Jobs himself had initially abandoned his own daughter, Lisa. Isaacson points out that irony. But he did reconnect with Lisa later, recognized her signature jaw, started spending time with her, taking walks, even rollerblading together.
Showing some growth there, maybe accountability?
Seems like it. Joanna Hoffman, his friend and colleague, apparently really pushed him on it. Hoffman hadn't known her own father and urged Jobs to be a better dad to Lisa. So yeah, signs of personal growth amidst all the business turmoil. And the book touches on his romantic relationships too, showing the full, complex human being behind the icon.
Okay, fast forward to the mid-90s. Apple is in serious trouble. Edge of the grave, as Isaacson puts it, almost bankrupt.
dire straits.
Hmm.
And the CEO then, Gil Amelio, he makes the fateful decision to buy NXT, which brings Steve Jobs back into Apple, initially just as an advisor.
Just an advisor.
Yeah.
But you knew that wouldn't last.
Oh, totally. There's that telling moment at Amelio's keynote. Jobs was supposed to be part of this triumphant trio scene with Amelio and Wozniak at the end, but instead, Jobs just ruthlessly ruined the closing moment by slowly backing off stage, leaving Amelio hanging.
Subtle. Not.
No, not at all. It was clear Jobs had his own script from the second he stepped back inside.
And Emilio didn't last long after that.
Nope. Just 7 days into the new year, it was clear the center would not hold. Emilio resigned. And Jobs, back on stage, wearing the famous shorts, sneakers, and a black turtleneck, he told Apple's top people exactly what he thought.
The famous line.
The products suck. There's no sex in them anymore. He wasn't there to advise. He was there to take over, to make a dent in the universe again. And he immediately started shaking everything up. Product lines, suppliers, everything. Laser focus.
And Apple was losing staggering amounts of money.
Over $1 billion his first year back. $1.04 billion loss. So he acted fast, laid off over 3,000 people. Brutal, but necessary. Repriced stock options to stop key people leaving. He basically rescued the company from the edge of the grave.
And brought a new focus. Profit.
Yeah. At Macworld in January '98, he ended his keynote with that phrase that became his trademark. Oh, and one more thing. Think, profit, direct. Shocking, almost. The stock soared. He also brilliantly played Microsoft's legal issues to get that crucial $150 million investment and patent deal that literally saved Apple.
Then came the rebranding. Think different.
Right. He immediately got Lee Clow from Chiat back on board. They created Think Different. That message, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels.
It resonated so deeply with Jobs' own self-image and with Apple's core identity.
It was perfect for them.
Absolutely. A rallying cry defining Apple against the perceived conformity of the PC world.
And he initially recorded the voiceover himself, right? But didn't use it. Yeah, in a moment of, you could say, surprising humility. He chose Richard Dreyfuss's voice instead. He said, "If we use my voice, when people find out, they will say it's about me. It's not. It's about Apple."
Smart move. Understanding the brand was bigger than him.
Exactly. Even though he was the crazy one, the rebel, it showed shrewd brand management, really cemented Apple's comeback identity.
Then came the partnership with Jony Ive. That seems absolutely crucial.
Immense. Jobs called Ive his spiritual partner at Apple, said, "I've had more operational power than anyone else at Apple except me." Huge trust.
And their collaboration started with the iMac, right?
Yeah. Isaacson describes him rejecting, like, a dozen phone models before landing on the final design. That joint pursuit of perfection, refusing to settle, it defined their partnership.
And the iMac itself was so different. Playful, colorful, translucent.
Totally radical for the time. All those beige boxes out there. Jobs apparently raved that he loved it, carried the prototype around HQ showing it off.
Even though it was expensive to make, that translucent case cost way more.
$60 per unit, 3 times that of a regular computer case, Isaacson says. But Jobs didn't demand studies or presentations to justify it. He trusted his gut, trusted Ive's design, believed superior design would sell itself, and he was right. It set Apple apart, became their blueprint.
That leads into the whole integrated strategy, hardware and software. That came from getting burned by Adobe.
Yeah, that was a key moment in 1999. Jobs felt Adobe screwed them. His big takeaway: Apple shouldn't get into any business where we didn't control both the hardware and the software. Otherwise, he felt they'd always be vulnerable.
So they started making their own apps. Final Cut Pro, iMovie.
Exactly. Building that tightly integrated ecosystem, controlling the whole widget, that became their massive competitive advantage.
And the peak of that initially was the digital hub strategy, unveiled with iTunes.
Right. In 2001, Jobs saw the computer becoming the hub for your digital life, music, photos, videos. He wanted to make music devices 10 times more valuable. Hence the slogan, rip, mix, burn.
Which sounded revolutionary,
Yeah.
maybe even a bit piratey at the time.
It did. But Jobs also saw the chaos in the music industry. Piracy is flipping everyone's circuit breakers, he said. He positioned Apple's integrated system as the solution.
He even mentioned LSD when showing off iTunes.
Yeah, to John Markoff. Said it reminded him of his youth, shows how personal these creative tools were for him.
And he managed to convince these skeptical music executives.
Amazingly, yes. Guys like Roger Ames at Warner, Doug Morris at Universal, he charmed them, convinced them Apple's complete system, The store, the software, the device was the answer to piracy. Morris basically admitted, of course we have to rely on Steve Jobs to do this because we don't have anyone at Universal who knows anything about technology.
Wow. He was the bridge.
He was the only one who could do it, really, because Apple controlled everything. Unlike, say, Sony, which had electronics and music divisions that couldn't work together effectively, Jobs' integrated model won.
Which brings us to the iPod.
Born out of Jobs' love for music and his utter disgust with existing MP3 players, he said they truly sucked. Flat out.
So he wanted something better.
Way better. Something that worked seamlessly in tandem with the iTunes software. Complex stuff on the computer, simple stuff on the device. That relentless focus on user experience, removing friction, making it insanely great.
And he backed it with huge marketing spend.
Massive gamble. Moved $75 million of advertising money to the iPod when the category barely existed. Apple outspent everybody by a factor of about 100.
Creating those iconic silhouette ads.
Exactly. That audacious marketing plus a great product just blew everyone else away. Established total dominance, proved his theory, bet big on marketing for truly great products.
Getting the Beatles on iTunes. That was a personal quest, wasn't it? Took decades.
Oh, yeah. A long and winding road, as Isaacson puts it. Started with a trademark lawsuit way back in 1978 where Apple Computer agreed not to get into the music business.
Didn't stick to that.
Nope. Finally getting the Beatles was this huge personal and business victory for him. He also did that deal with U2 for the special black iPod, though he apparently second-guessed the color and the royalties even after the deal was done. Always tweaking, always pushing for perfection.
Okay, next revolution. The iPhone. That started with a tablet interface.
Kind of backwards, yeah. They were developing this amazing multi-touch interface for a tablet, but Jobs realized that was the solution for the phone they were struggling to design.
So he paused the tablet.
Instantly, put the tablet on hold, threw all resources at the phone. His reasoning, if it worked on a phone, I knew we could go back and use it on a tablet. Incredible strategic pivot, changed everything.
But initially, he didn't want third-party apps on the iPhone, right?
Right. He wanted total control, focus, feared the complexities of policing developers, wanted that curated, closed experience.
But he changed his mind.
Yeah. After the launch, the board pushed, there were discussions, and eventually the App Store was born. A huge shift for him, away from absolute control towards a more open platform. Maybe unexpected.
And the App Store just exploded.
Created a new industry overnight, Isaacson writes. Transformed everything. Allowed tiny developers, entrepreneurs, to create hit apps from dorm rooms. Even big publishers like Callaway decided to burn the boats and go all in on apps.
The numbers were staggering.
By June 2011, Apple had paid out $2.5 billion to app developers, an entirely new model of wealth creation and innovation that Jobs ultimately enabled, even if it wasn't his first instinct.
So after the iPhone, they went back to the tablet, the iPad.
Revived the project. And again, meticulous design with Ive. They apparently looked at 20 models of rounded rectangles, just playing with sizes and shapes to get the feel right.
And the guiding principle.
Everything they did had to defer to the screen. Get rid of buttons, distractions, ultimate simplicity, focus. Isaacson notes a patent from 2004 already showed sketches that look like the iPad. It was cooking for a long time.
And I've had that idea about rounding the bottom edge.
Yeah, to make it feel more casual and friendly so you'd naturally scoop it up rather than lifting it carefully. Tiny detail, huge insight into user experience, that emotional connection.
Jobs called it the intersection of technology and liberal arts.
Right. And the digital reincarnation of the whole Earth catalog, emphasizing that blend of art, design, and tech that made Apple unique.
Even though it got mocked initially. The name, the lack of features.
Oh, yeah. Hashtag iTampon was trending on Twitter. Brutal. But it proved transformative, created a whole new category.
His dealings with Rupert Murdoch over the daily magazine for iPad showed his tough side with old media, too.
Yeah, he was blunt. Told Murdoch the print business sucks, publishers don't get it about digital. Abrasive, maybe offensive, but often highlighting harsh truths about adapting to the digital world. He told one News Corp exec something that basically predicted the guy would lose his job, and he did. Sharp, if brutal, insights.
Then the Google-Android rivalry. That got really personal for Jobs.
Deeply personal. He felt totally betrayed by Google, especially since CEO Eric Schmidt had been on Apple's board while the iPhone and iPad were being developed, and he saw Google founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin as mentees.
He thought Android was a ripoff.
Shamelessly ripped off from Apple's multi-touch interface, was his view, led to shouting matches, threats of thermonuclear war, intense stuff.
And it represented that fundamental debate, closed versus open.
Exactly. As Jobs framed it, integrated versus fragmented, Jobs, with his controlling perfectionism, believed 100% in Apple's tightly integrated hardware-software content model. The only way, in his mind, to get a simple user experience. Elegant, delightful products versus kludgy rival products.
While Google, under Schmidt, argued for openness, choice, modification.
Right. More user choice, maybe faster innovation through open systems. That fundamental philosophical clash defined the mobile world we live in, and it makes you think, doesn't it? Which approach really serves the user best in the long run? Is it integration or openness? Does it depend on the product, the time? Still a relevant question.
The book obviously has to cover Jobs' long battle with cancer, starting back in 2004. His health issues became public knowledge again around 2008.
Yeah, and he fought hard to keep it private. Isaacson details his frustration with Fortune magazine trying to publish a story about it. He even called the editor from Hawaii to try and kill the piece.
What did he say?
Famously asked, "So you've uncovered the fact that I'm an asshole. Why is that news?" Shows his self-awareness, maybe, but also that fierce need to control his own narrative, even about his health.
And his treatment was initially fragmented. That seems ironic.
Hugely ironic, given his obsession with integration at Apple. But Isaacson writes his wife, Laureen Powell, stepped in forcefully. She convened all his different doctors, pushed for a coordinated, integrated approach, just like how Jobs ran Apple, demanded a unified strategy.
She sounds formidable.
Definitely comes across that way, though the secrecy around his health caused tension too. Board member Jerry York apparently expressed disgust about how it was handled, wishing he'd resigned over it. Shows the difficulties.
By 2011, his health was clearly failing badly.
Yeah, new tumors, severe weight loss. In August, he finally resigned as CEO, suggested Tim Cook replace him, offered to stay on as chairman.
And the transition was smooth, wasn't it?
Remarkably smooth, considering. Board member Mickey Drexler called it the most incredible thing I've ever seen in business. A testament to Jobs' planning, his dedication to Apple's future beyond himself.
His last public appearance, launching iCloud, he looked frail but still determined.
Yeah, wearing extra layers to hide how gaunt he was. But still pushing, still envisioning Apple's future, right up to planning the new Apple Park campus.
The spaceship campus.
Right, that huge winding racetrack shape. He wanted it bathed in sun, with spaces designed for serendipitous and fluid meeting spaces, promoting collaboration.
But with a classic Jobs twist.
Yeah. He insisted the windows couldn't be opened. Why? Because that would just allow people to screw things up. Even in his final architectural vision, it was that perfect blend, foster open collaboration, but within a tightly controlled, perfect system. That was pure Jobs. His daughter Erin apparently understood, saying he juggled being CEO and dad pretty well, accepting his divided attention because his work was so important.
So looking back, what are the big takeaways, the lasting value from his life, according to Isaacson?
Well, first, that relentless focus on end-to-end integration, hardware, software services working seamlessly, that closed and tightly integrated system, born from his controlling perfectionism, it gave Apple a huge advantage, resulted in elegant, delightful products compared to often kludgy rival products.
See?
It was baked into the company's soul, building a culture of excellence. A players like to work with A players, he always said. He insisted on a collaborative hiring process. Marketing had to talk to engineering, engineering to design. Everyone had to be top-notch. That focus on talent was key at Pixar, key to Apple's turnaround. He was ruthless about mediocrity.
Third insight.
Real artistship, that famous phrase, innovation isn't just ideas, it's about execution. Bringing those ideas to fruition, getting products out the door, that relentless drive to ship, even if it caused friction, was fundamental to his approach and to Apple's impact. Ideas alone were worthless to him.
And finally, the humanities connection.
Absolutely crucial. He fundamentally believed Apple needed the humanities and liberal arts in its DNA, something he felt Microsoft totally lacked. He said even when they saw the Mac, they couldn't copy it well. They totally didn't get it.
Why not?
Because for Jobs, it wasn't just about technology. It was that intersection of creativity and tech, art and engineering, making tools that weren't just functional, but beautiful, intuitive, maybe even inspiring. That was Apple's secret sauce, his personal philosophy made real.
So as we wrap this up, it's just the intensity that stands out, doesn't it? The sheer force of will and how his personal story, abandonment, countercultures in it, it all fit into that relentless pursuit of perfection and control in the products. They really were extensions of him.
Absolutely. This deep dive shows how that demanding nature, the RDF, that singular focus on product purity, sometimes at great human cost, it did lead to revolutionary products that changed everything. But it forces you to ask, right? Can you have that kind of disruptive innovation without that level of obsession, even with all the challenges and collateral damage it creates?
It's a tough question. But the lessons seem clear from Isaacson's account. Passion for the product above all else. Deep integration. Belief in design intuition. And the courage to make hard choices. Stick to a vision. He didn't just build gadgets. He built a world, a philosophy.
And maybe the most enduring legacy is demonstrating that real value today comes from connecting technology not just logically but emotionally, seamlessly weaving it with human creativity, aesthetics, making things that are beautiful, intuitive, maybe even a little magical. That blend seems more relevant than ever.
We really hope this deep dive has given you a richer, maybe more complex understanding of Steve Jobs, the genius, the flaws, the whole package. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
So the question for you is, what will you choose to unpack next in your own life?